Satanic Singles dating sites. Are they a good idea? The answer is no. The reasons why, and a similar story about unrealistic satanic projects in today's episode of Satansplain.
Well, it's not Satan worship, it's Satanism. It's embracing the life-enriching things which have traditionally been given the devil's name. Pride, lust, earthly success, rational self-interest, atheism, humor, nonconformity, science, a passion for living, being selective about whom we love. We don't see these as shameful sins, but empowering ideals. And we also recognize the psychological power and fun of symbolism and aesthetics, so we utilize Satan as mythology's most fitting mascot for what we're about.
Satansplain, Satanic Talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Visit the official website, satansplain.com, for links and more information. I'm sure many of you listeners are, like myself, Satanists who've participated in some satanic discussion forum or another on the internet. I've been using them since at least the mid-1990s, and sometimes you'll see a question that you've seen show up a number of times before. One of those questions that I see every so often is, hey, does anybody know of a satanic dating site? Or for that matter, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was a site or an app for finding satanic singles? And the answer really is no. No, it's not a good idea. And I will present my arguments as to why satanic dating sites are a silly idea. Now, before I get to my list of reasons, let me be fair and back up here a moment and say, I get why people would propose such a thing. I understand why, to some people, the idea of a place where satanic singles can look up and find other fellow satanic Satanists, may sound like a good idea. I mean, why do dating websites and dating apps exist in the first place? Well, even before the internet, there have been classifieds in the newspaper and video dating companies. For those who aren't old enough to remember those video dating companies, you would go to these dating companies, record a video of yourself, talk about who you are, your stats, what you're looking for, and then you could browse tapes of other people's videos and they could browse yours. So pre-internet or post-internet, the reality is there are lots of humans out there looking for companionship, sex, romance, and so on, and maybe they've had no luck with finding somebody in their circle of acquaintances, or in other single bars, or flirting with strangers, and thus, just getting direct correspondence with other people looking for a date seems to be a logical solution, a quicker path to that result. When it comes to finding a companion, a big issue that comes up is one of compatibility. There are lots of things that might determine compatibility. One theme that shows up a lot with people is religion. People who are especially devout in one particular religion may have a tough time getting along with somebody of a different religion. It's not impossible for a mixed religion relationship to work, and I'll say more about that later. But the fact of the matter is that different people have their own different ideas on ethics and standards and worldviews, and a religion is often one way to summarize all of that sort of stuff. So take all of the above and now additionally consider the position that a single Satanist might be in. As I've said in one or two episodes already, Satanists are a minority. We will always be a minority. Satanism is an adversarial religion that is not for the masses. And because of that, many Satanists may feel that they're wholly incompatible with most of humanity. And a Satanist may end up thinking, gee, if I could just find an attractive Satanist to have as my partner, that would solve so many of the problems I have. If only there were some place where I could just directly meet somebody like that, it would be a perfect solution. Well, that's the pipe dream. That's the reasoning some people fall for, but let's actually think this through. There are numerous problems that you would have with a satanic dating site. And yes, some people have attempted trying to make these, and not surprisingly, we see these sorts of things showing up. Problem number one, how many people do you think would actually be on a site like that? Again, Satanists are already a minority to begin with, but let's further remove from that population Satanists who are already married or otherwise have no interest using a dating site, satanic or otherwise. They're already in a relationship or they're not looking for one. Let's remove people who say they're Satanists but aren't Satanists. People like devil worshippers, for example. They might see a Satanism dating app and go there, or equally clueless people who've never read the Satanic Bible, but instead read a bogus list on the internet of 7 mass appeal items. I think we know some people like that. Now, all of these pseudo-Satanists that I mentioned, we have enough of those people just showing up on general message boards for Satanism. But again, these are the people you may also see on a dating site for Satanists if one was established. And you'd be in for quite a surprise on your first date when you meet and you realize that you two have completely different definitions of Satanism. I wouldn't even put it past some Christians to make fake profiles for themselves on a satanic dating site so they could meet Satanists in person for the chance to proselytize to them, or maybe do worse. So that's one problem, just one problem, and it's already a big enough problem to show why the idea probably just wouldn't work. You need a big pool of people to make a dating site of any kind work. And now here's a second problem. You would most likely end up having some of the same problems that inflict most dating sites in general. For example, way more male profiles than female profiles. Way more people who say, well, I'm not going to post a profile of myself. I'll just browse what's here first. Which of course means that half of the people using the site may be interested don't know about half of the people interested because none of them are posting their own profiles. And of course, some profiles on single sites are flat out fake. They're spammers with links to porn sites or whatever. But let's say that by some miracle, you're a single Satanist, you find another single Satanist on a satanic dating site, and they're of the sex that matches your sexual orientation, and they're about your same age, and they actually supply a photo and you don't find them particularly hideous. Well, even with all that, you're still not home free just yet. What if this Satanist that you found lives thousands of miles away? I mean, maybe that could work. Some people have been able to pull off long-distance relationships. Maybe you still have it in your mind that, well, if this is a soulmate, so to speak, the distance wouldn't matter. It would be worth it. You could try it. But it seems weird to me that you'd go on a dating site and your first date requires an airplane ticket. 3,000 miles is a long way to go for a cup of coffee, Or maybe your soulmate is out there, but understandably is not putting an ad on this single site in the first place. All right, just for the sake of the argument, to keep things a little simpler, let's assume that the person wanting the Satanic Singles site is a guy, a straight guy. A straight guy is saying, hey, why don't we have a Satanic Singles site? And let's assume that by some miracle, there is a site and there are enough legit profiles on a Satanic Singles site of women, and they're not all pseudo-Satanists, and he finds a Satanic Single woman and doesn't live thousands of miles away. Well, what if she is still not interested in you? Maybe she has 10 or 20 other equally horny satanic male singles who are interested in her, and, well, you're not at the top of her pick list, to put it nicely. And finally, we get to what I think is a fundamental problem of this whole satanic dating site idea in the first place. This notion that some single Satanists have, thinking that if they just found another single Satanist to have a relationship with, that 99% of their relationship problems would be solved. She's a Satanist, so I don't have to worry about her having stupid Christian beliefs. She'll already understand why things like pride and indulgence and meritocracy are good. She won't guilt-trip me for making a misanthropic joke. She'll already understand the Satanic Bible. She'll already have a copy. We'll be so compatible because we're both Satanists. Well, I'm sorry to say this, but the reality is that just because two people are Satanists, it is no absolute guarantee of compatibility in a relationship. Would you statistically have a much better shot of compatibility dating a fellow Satanist than you would dating a born-again Christian? Oh yeah, sure. But again, just because two people are Satanists is no guarantee that they'll get along. And I mean, this is true even outside of the world of dating. I can think of 2 or 3 Satanists who live not too far from me, who completely understand Satanism. They live Satanism. They're even members of the Church of Satan. And yet I have no desire to go hang out with them. They're bona fide Satanists. They're not doing anything wrong or unsatanic. I just don't get along with them as people. We don't have much in common besides Satanism. We're not into the same hobbies. We're at opposite ends of the political spectrum. Our personalities and our sense of humor and stuff like that just don't mesh together. So again, this extends to dating as well. Now, conversely, just as finding another single Satanist is no guarantee of compatibility, dating somebody who is not a Satanist does not necessarily mean you won't be compatible. There are plenty of happily married satanic couples and plenty of disaster stories of Satanists trying to date non-Satanists, but there are also Satanists who are happily in a relationship with a non-Satanist, and I don't think it's as simple as they settled for somebody less than ideal. I guess the standard term for these sorts of relationships are interfaith marriages or interfaith relationships, when the people involved are of two different religions. It can work. It can work because we can see examples of Satanists in successful relationships like that. On a side note, I would say about interfaith relationships is that if one partner believes the other partner is in some kind of danger due to their choice of religion, then that relationship's not going to work. Are there Satanists who are married to Christians? Yeah, believe it or not, they do exist. Are these Christians the kind of Christians who sincerely believe that God will send their spouse to hell for being a Satanist? No, I'm guessing that they're not, otherwise those dates probably wouldn't have lasted long. Or let's be fair here. Conversely, if the Satanist is in a relationship with a Christian and turns to the Christian spouse and says, well, you're in danger of living life as a self-loathing human sheep because you stupidly worship that dead Nazarene nailed to a stick. Well, that kind of relationship isn't going to work either. A final point that I want to make on this notion of satanic dating sites, though, is something that I thought of making as the first point, but instead I decided to save it to the last. And that is this. As a Satanist, shouldn't you be able to attract a mate through other means? I mean, we have entire books on the topic of lesser magic. The Satanic Bible includes the conjuration of lust and how you would ritualistically incorporate that in your pursuit of a partner. I'm not saying that the single sites are only for the desperate and the hopeless, but have you tried getting out of the house to meet people? Going to places to meet other Satanists where they may be. I mean, we Satanists do meet in person now and then, whether it's at an officially advertised event or not. And I shall end my rant here on why satanic single sites are a bad idea, and that the idea just gets worse the more you think of it. We'll be back in a moment. You are listening to Satansplain.
Satansplain, real satanic talk with Church of Satan Magister Bill M. For questions, comments, and correspondence, send an email to bill@satansplain.com.
Do satanic cults lurk in the shadows? Can memories of satanic ritual abuse be repressed? Do exorcisms really drive out demons? And are those demons always possessing Zach Baggins? I'm JD Sword, the Satanic Skeptic. Join me on The Devil in the Details as I examine these questions and more, bringing a skeptical and satanic perspective to the paranormal. The Devil in the Details, available on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and more.
Magister Bill M. here with Satansplain. Remember that there are a variety of options available for listening to Satansplain. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and other places, including right on the Satansplain website itself, Satansplain.com. However you choose to listen to the show, please give the show a like and a subscribe where applicable. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. Go to Satansplain.com for any and all links. Also, you can email me with your questions, comments, complaints, death threats, ice cream recipes, whatever. Bill@Satansplain.com. That is the email address. In talking about the satanic dating site, I got to thinking about this correspondence I had with somebody a couple years back. I'm going to keep the details anonymous, but I'm going to share this with you as I think it's another illustrative example of something that sounds like it might make sense on the surface, but the more you think about it, you paint a more realistic picture and realize that this thing that you think would be helpful for a lot of Satanists may not really be so. This fellow messages me. He says he's a Satanist. He adheres to Satanism as described in the Satanic Bible. And he says, quote, I have a project that I've been working on called the Chapel of Lucifer. Now, That's not the real name he gave me. I'm just making that up off the top of my head. Like I said, I'm hiding the details to, protect here. Maybe there are some actual idiots out there calling themselves the Chapel of Lucifer. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised, but hopefully you catch my drift. The point is, it was a name in the form of blank, something that sounds like Church of Satan, but isn't. Anyway, he continues, quote, "The purpose is to point out inconsistencies, contradictions, and outright stupidity in evangelical propaganda and dogma. Also to promote satanic artists and creatives. It is not meant to be a replacement of the Church of Satan or branch or anything like that. Is this something that could potentially cause issues?" Also, he adds, "It isn't changing or subtracting from Satanism or the foundations that Magus LeVay, the Church of Satan, and Magus Gilmore worked hard to defend and build over the last half century. The goal is to explore different archetypes for use in rituals and personal practices, also to publish our own rituals." So I replied back. I said, well, first of all, I would suggest changing the name only because the name sounds like some sort of rival group. I mean, again, you see this all the time. Somebody will set up a group called the Mosque of Lucifer or the Temple of Beelzebub or some other play on the name Church of Satan and call themselves the High Priest, not really offer anything new or different or needed to the world. And so it goes. Dime a dozen examples out there. And I told this guy there was, for example, at that time, somebody I knew on Facebook who made a page called the Synagogue of Satan. And to be clear, it wasn't passing itself off as some kind of satanic organization. It was just a personal blog page where this guy would share his poetry and art and stuff like that. But again, a lot of Satanists I know saw the name and said, oh, well, this looks like one of those stupid pseudo-satanic groups like, we've seen a million times. Now, confusingly enough, there was indeed an anti-Church of Satan organization or website I remember seeing some 20 years ago, also called the same name, Synagogue of Satan. In fact, there was a second organization like that, only they spelled it S-I-N instead of S-Y-N. Again, dozens and dozens of examples of pseudo-groups like this. But getting back to this guy I was talking to, I said, well, aside from the name, I suppose it might not cause any problems with joining the Church of Satan. I mean, Church of Satan members themselves have set up many other groups and sites for creative output over the years. For example, Radio Free Satan, online radio station, Underworld Amusements, publishing the Satanic Witch Bibliography Project, or print publications like zines. But then he continues, well, the reason I picked the name is because I am an ordained minister and I want to offer services for funerals and weddings later on. Okay, here was my reply. I told him it's perfectly understandable and great to want to do something actively as a Satanist, let alone do something as a COS member. I guess my main concern here is that you may be needlessly creating something that already exists. You may be reinventing the wheel here. For example, I've run into Satanists who want to do music podcasts and they try to do it all alone without stopping to consider things like, am I offering content that would make this different from any other existing podcasts out there? Or never stopping to consider, do I have enough technical know-how to do all this on my own? Do I have the material and the time to reach episode number 10 by the end of a year? And so on. I knew one Satanist who apparently wanted to do a podcast featuring all sorts of pop music, which means copyrighted music. He could have approached Radio Free Satan for something like that. Radio Free Satan is already an established station with shows made by Church of Satan members. It handles all of the licensing and distribution and stuff like that. It already has an audience you could start reaching, already has a staff of great and experienced podcasters who can maybe lend some advice. Alas, no. He didn't think of approaching Radio Free Satan. Instead, he went straight to YouTube, thinking it would be fine. And well, sure enough, YouTube was able to pick up on the copyrighted material immediately, flagged his show for copyright violation, and took it down. So he had something nobody can end up finding or hearing. Now, when it comes to a ministry for weddings and funerals, if you're doing this strictly within the context of Satanism, then the biggest problem I see is, why would somebody go to you for such services? why would they not contact and go through the Church of Satan instead? In the Church of Satan, we already have quite a few members who can perform and have performed things like weddings and funerals, myself included. And many of us have experience and recognition in particular states of being a legally ordained minister. And here again, we come to a problem I mentioned with the dating apps. Satanists are quite a minority. So really, how often of a demand is there for a satanic wedding or a satanic funeral? They certainly happen, sure. But do they happen often enough that you would need to form a whole new business just to do that? And again, given that we already have the Church of Satan. I know some Satanists who already do wedding officiation and funerals professionally, but they typically offer more than strictly satanic options. Because again, the numbers. Now, does this mean that you should give up your entire dream of being a satanic minister for hire? Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but again, try to keep the bigger picture in mind. If you were to build a satanic think tank site of sorts, just to explore, discuss, and publish satanic rituals, well, that sounds like something that could work. And then maybe after getting something like that established, getting to be a legal officiant in your state and do a wedding, and showing this to the Church of Satan as a person who was already a Church of Satan member, maybe at that point, maybe it's possible that the Church of Satan may send more opportunities your way. They may say, oh, somebody from Ohio contacted the Church of Satan and wants to know if we can officiate their wedding. Well, Reverend Bob is in Ohio and he does that sort of thing and he can do that, so let's forward that to him. Now, this is all just pure speculation, just a purely hypothetical example, because again, who knows how often that would really come up. But it's at least something more realistic than trying to establish your own satanic minister for hire business. So getting back to the points I made earlier, I completely understand your excitement. I salute you for your enthusiasm, but even if you put a disclaimer on your site explaining that you're not a rival to the Church of Satan, that you support the Church of Satan and all that, I think most Satanists would still look at the name and say, okay, what is this Chapel of Lucifer really offering me? What are they offering that I'm not already getting through my Church of Satan membership? It says here on your website, quote, you contribute to the satanic religion by bringing your own experiences, concepts, and content to the altar. Well, I can already do that. You say your site is a place where one can, quote, discuss new ideas on ritual, aesthetics, and archetypes and support satanic creativity. Okay, so what? I can already go to an existing Satanism forum, either open to the public or one just for COS members only, and do that there. So why does the world need a new separate Chapel of Lucifer Industries thing for such things? And once again, I'm not saying you should give up all aspirations of interacting with other Satanists in the world in the context of satanic ritual, whether it's general discussion, group ritual, meetups, wedding officiating, or whatever. But consider the bigger picture and make sure you're channeling your efforts in the right direction. Satanic Sins number 6 and 8. Look them up. They're cruel. And I'm going to leave things there. Thank you for listening. Hail Satan. You have been listening to Satansplain. If you have enjoyed this episode, please give it a like and subscribe where available. For more information on the show, visit Satansplain.com. And to learn more about Satanism itself, visit churchofsatan.com. This episode, copyright 2022, Magister Bill M.